Acted scammers right from day one. And we went through a lot of different scams over the years. Remember the whole Dan Larimer period? He came up with 5 or 6 scams, big scams. And I can name others, the big cyclical and cyclical. And you see the market cap names change over the years. Bitcoin always stays at the top. And now we've got like these Wall Street types and VCs and hedge fund guys with nicer suits. They've gone down the Dan Larimer route. They've gone down the shitcoin route, and they get washed out. So this is a big washout. Took out the last 2 or 3 years of scammers, big scammers. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember, who was that guy? He was popular for a while. He wears a bow tie all the time.
Jeffrey Tucker.
Yeah, Jeffrey Tucker. Jeffrey Tucker was at, I believe he was at the Prague conference, and he presented Bitcoin as gold. So he was making the case that Bitcoin was a store of value and digital gold. The situation in Bitcoin is the volatility. So when you have a collapse, and we've had 3 80% collapses over the years, everyone's assumptions just gets blown out the window. Doesn't matter what you think it is. When you have an 80% collapse, you're just kind of in the middle of a storm, and now you're in the water and you're swimming and you don't know what's going on. And I think a lot of times during those 80% collapses, people's timelines get distorted. So if you have, like we saw the price go from $30 back to $1, and all the people who were talking about all the great things for Bitcoin coming in different places in the economy, suddenly you're thinking, well, maybe it's going to take longer than we thought. We thought this was going to happen in another few years. Maybe it's going to take 20 years. Okay, then Bitcoin, bam, there it is. It's up to 1,000. You're like, oh, this is great. We're going to build an entire future on this. Then crashes down to 200. And you're like, oh, well, maybe it's going to take another 10 or 15 years. Then zoom, it goes up to 20,000. And you're like, hey, we were right all along for these past 5 or 6 years. There's going to be a new future. And then crashes down to 3,800. And they're like, oh, maybe this is going to take 10 or 15 years. Oh, now it's at 70,000. We were right. It's going to be a brand new future. Everything's going to be like we said it was going to be. Boom. Now down to 29, 28,000, 28,500. So, every time you have one of these moves, 50, 60, 70, 80% move, you're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's going to take 10 years, not 2 years. In that case, well, maybe I should get a hobby. I should start raising pigs. Maybe I'll start some shit coins like Dan Larimer. Maybe I'll buy, a casino. Maybe, right? So your mind wanders during these extreme periods of volatility, and I think that's a big problem. And then suddenly the price catapults and it jumps. Oh, it's at 150. It's at 200,000. Oh, we were right all along. This is what's going to happen. So this is just the volatility is incredible. And that's a major cycle. And then the shitcoin cycle hit a major inflection point in the last month or so. It had been since 2017, and the ICO craze was the buildup of all the shitcoin heroes of the past 4 years, I would say. The names, we can get into them or not get into them, but the latest names in both shitcoinery and hedge funnery and media funnery had a big move, and now they've been kind of washed out, wiped out, decimated. Another cyclical, those two cycles hit at the same time. De-dollarization and this 4th or 5th shitcoin cycle both hit. Yeah, funny story, that Novogratz story, really. I mean, in 2015, his hedge fund closed after having 2 very bad years, and he decided to hang it up, as happens all the time in hedge fund business. Hedge funds almost never outperform the market over any decent amount of time, like 3 or 4 years. Hedge funds typically have 1 or 2 great years, like Cathie Wood, for example. She's not a hedge fund per se, but she has a really hot hand for a year or two, and then now she's underperforming the NASDAQ. That's pretty much 98-99% of the money management business of they have a couple of great years, and then they underperform for many years. And typically just owning the market with an index fund outperforms hedge funds. That's been true since the beginning of index funds. But so Mike Novogratz, I think in 2015, he closed shop. That happens. He had 2 very bad years. And then I guess it's in 2018 or so when he was gifted an enormous amount of Ethereum from the pre-mine from Vitalik, and he became, instant billions or dollars or so in profit with that, and that does something to your mind. It makes you sloppy as a money manager, because he didn't really do any due diligence or anything with that. He was just gifted it. He was a friend with Joe Lubin. They had, I believe, gone to university together.
Oh.
And so he got the call from Joe and said, hey, you should check this thing out called Ethereum. Here's this guy Vitalik. It's obviously
free money, just like the Fed.
It's free money. And he made an instant hit. So then your habits are very bad because you're not really doing your due diligence. But the thing about Luna with Novogratz is that, which is kind of surprising, is that apparently they did no due diligence whatsoever. The number of people who were going out and just pinpointing in great detail the extent to which this thing was a scam, an obvious Ponzi, is huge. From the top analysts who do know what they're talking about, down to even some of the fellow scammers. I saw a few scammers out there saying, I'm a scammer, but this takes the cake. This is the scammiest scam of all. So there was no due diligence whatsoever. And to your point, the losses on the books appear to be, we don't know yet because he's gone radio silent, but it appears as though these losses were unhedged. Hedge fund, it says in the name, hedge, right? You're supposed to be hedged. It seems like they were just, they had an unhedged position in this, and they just got decimated, which is also another surprising part of this. But the thing is that just because you're a scammer before you got into quote unquote crypto doesn't make you any less of a scammer in crypto. It's like, it's a great story with Blythe Masters. You remember when she was at JP Morgan, she was rigging the silver market. Pretty obvious, well-documented story of Blythe Masters and the silver market rigging. And then thanks to Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver campaign that we did, she got fired. And next thing she did, she popped up in something called blockchain. That's right, blockchain. So you took the same scammy person, you relabeled it as a blockchain. She was in the UK, some company named something 3 R3,
yeah.
And as Blythe Masters, and Bloomberg had a cover story, blockchain. And this was during the period when everyone said Bitcoin sucks, it's all about the blockchain over Bitcoin. And then that blew up, of course, because her character was flawed from the beginning. And just because she changes the label and she's now into a different part of the market doesn't make her any less of a scamster. Right. And the way they justify it is that in order for this to have any hope of being repaired, we must fix the problem of liquidity.
Yes,
so this is the classic Wall Street ruse of liquidity versus insolvency. So Wall Street firms are not insolvent, they're just illiquid. But all the mom and pop shop out there that are being burned by all this financial fraud, they're insolvent and they need to go away. Lehman Brothers was insolvent, Bear Stearns was insolvent, but Goldman Sachs just had a liquidity problem. So that is how they decide through financial triage who lives and who dies. Fact is, they're all insolvent. It's remarkable that Ben Bernanke this past week and Jay Powell echoed the sentiment, saying that, he wished he had raised rates sooner, because by not raising rates sooner, they created the inflation that we're all suffering from now. Now, if you watch Max and Stacy for the last 20 years, we've been dead accurate on saying that all the money printing by all of these central banks and all of their lying about there being deflation, which is what they used to call inflation even a year and a half ago, the central bank would say, look at all this deflation, let's print more money, even though it was all inflation, there is no deflation, and they would cause this inflation. Now, of course, the genie's out of the bottle and there's no way to raise rates fast enough or hard enough to stop systemic collapse. So now they're going to say, well, we should have raised rates earlier. Even that piece in the Rotterdam lecture that I gave, where I'm on stage screaming It's a piece you can find on YouTube. At the end of the piece, I'm saying these financial terrorists, they need to raise rates right now. I was screaming to raise rates back 5 or 6 years ago when it would have stemmed and cured, and there would have been a remedy to the problems that are now facing places like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a country in absolute meltdown because of all the money printing from these central banks, and they're insolvent. But the banker will say they are insolvent, and that's the direct result of the money printing that's going on. And they're really the first economy that I'm noticing that is going into absolute breakdown and collapse, and that will spread to 5 or 6 more countries in the next few months in baseball.
Yeah.
If you're pitching stocks for tens of thousands of pitches over a number of years, you get very good at doing that. So that's an old school salesperson, and then they meet crypto, and we see some interesting. It's a different world. So Novogratz and Scaramucci and others and Kevin O'Leary, they're really from the old school. They're from a different era, and then they glom themselves onto crypto, and it was never going to work. You have Michael Saylor, who's a technologist, has been the longest serving technologist in America. For like 12 years, he's been the CEO of MicroStrategy, which
12?
is,
You mean
20, over 20
years.
It's unparalleled, really. He's been doing this for 20 years. And then he meets Bitcoin, and it's like hand and glove. There's a seamless meeting of technologist, CEO, and the greatest asset that's ever come along in 5,000 years. You put those two together, and we know what the story is. And it's a beautiful marriage. It's a perfect marriage. But everybody else who's been around for a number of years, they are not really naturally a fit with Bitcoin. And then the people who are completely conversant in Bitcoin, particularly on the technology side, are horrible communicators, right? They're not professional communicators. They're not professional salespeople. So they don't really, if you look at all the early OGs and the early technology people, they don't know how to put two sentences together in a way that makes any sense to anybody other than somebody else on a chat board somewhere in the middle of cyberspace at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? So that doesn't work. Then you just have a cascade of scammers. And I've said before, Wall Street is a scammy place. I was surprised when I started working in Los Angeles that it's even scammier than Wall Street, because
Hollywood.
In Hollywood, because at least on Wall Street, every morning the prices are printed in the paper, and it's the box score. You know who was lying and who was telling the truth, because the price will tell you, oh, that guy was lying because that thing just blew up 30%. But in Hollywood, there is no accounting at all. You can be a professional liar your entire career in Hollywood and never ever have an accounting day of your life. So it's actually incredibly scammy. But not outdone is crypto land. This is by far the scammiest industry ever to come down the pike in 1,000 years. And that's what makes part of being a Bitcoin maximalism difficult, is that you're dealing literally in a shit show. You've got something that's valuable and you're in a cyclone of shit, and people are just yelling at you like, fuck you. That's, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? It's like, we're going to protect this. We're going to keep it pure. We're going to keep it Bitcoin. And, so now it's a new cycle. We got a new scam coming. We're ready for it. Who cares? Fuck you. Hit me with your best shot. We're still going to a lot higher in hyper-Bitcoinization.
Speaking of hyper-Bitcoinization,